Make it a little closer.
Good afternoon, Miami parents and families. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks to Mark Pontius for allowing us the time today to speak with you in sort of an ongoing webinar program that Mark's office has been sponsoring, and I'm sure there'll be other times that we'll engage with you during this semester and the academic year. So this is the webinar on the first 6 weeks of college. It's a loose topic, and we're going to actually cover a lot of things, a lot of them related to what's been going on and what sort of resources are available to your students to help ensure their success. And in fact, the first 6 weeks is actually a critical period for them and for many of you as you adjust to the absence of a loved one in the house. So we're going to take a minute to introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about what we do here at Miami. And then we have a large number of things to talk with you about today, and maybe even ideally we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I'm going to let Rebecca introduce herself now and tell you a little bit about her work.
Thank you. I'm Rebecca Baudry-Young, and I'm the director for our Office of Student Wellness. I want to remind folks that if you would like to interact with us, to please use the chat function, and you can enter questions, and Mark will field those questions for us, and we'll do our best to answer those as we go, okay? The Office of Student Wellness has a peer education group called HAWKS. The HAWKS are Health Advocates for Wellness, Knowledge, and Skills. And many of your students may have already been familiar with the HAWKS, or they will be soon, because they do a lot of programming in residence halls, on campus, and even off campus to promote topics about health, topics about drinking and alcohol use, topics about sexual health, as well as healthy relationships, and being physically fit. We talk about nutrition, and basically we try to encourage our students to learn more about how to take care of their well-being. And so we really encourage you to talk to your students about how they can engage in HAWKS and to seek out some of those programs. We also have already interacted with your students through Alcohol EDU, which is the online class that was required to be finished by today, that talks a little bit about that transition from high school into college and what the environment might be like and how college alcohol use can look a lot different than it did in high school. And so hopefully your students feel more prepared about that. There's a part 2 to this course that will be launched in October, so you may want to remind your students about that too. You'll find those deadlines on the calendar that the Parents Office has distributed to our families over orientation. We hope that your students engage with our office throughout the year. We'll have lots of events coming up, but we also partner with other offices like the Office of Student Activities, and we'll talk a little bit more about all the opportunities on campus to get involved and some things that are happening in the community in Oxford that they can be involved in too.
Thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca mentioned Alcohol EDU and the deadline. And what's that deadline, Rebecca? Is it midnight?
It is midnight tonight.
All right.
Let's get that done.
So this is an opportunity to perhaps make a call, see how the first day went. Ask your loved one if they finished Alcohol EDU round 1. And this is actually, that Alcohol EDU data is very important to us, by the way. And interestingly, your students know, and you may remember from orientation, that our expectation is that on this first round of Alcohol EDU data that 60% of our incoming students, 60, will report that they're non-drinkers, meaning that they haven't had a drink in the last 2 weeks or they abstain. And then this number, when we take the survey the second time at about the 6-week point of the semester, so it fits in right in with our topic of conversation today, that number and that percentage of non-drinkers drops to about 50% at about the 6-week mark. So that's part of what we want to talk with you about today in terms of the things that happen in the first 6 weeks. But let me introduce myself as well. I'm Mike Kerm. It's my privilege to serve as Dean of Students at Miami University. I've been here 29 years. I entered 29 years ago as a faculty member in the Department of Economics, and then served in administration in the business school for a few years before now serving as Dean of Students. I'm also a dad, and I have had a son graduate from Miami about a year ago, who's now off the Kerm payroll and gainfully employed in Chicago. Thank you, Miami University. And I have a daughter who's going into her senior year in college. So I have a few perspectives on Miami students I think that may be relevant today. And as Dean of Students, there's a number of offices that report either directly or indirectly through the Dean of Students office. And part of what we want to talk with you about anyway is the resources that are available on campus. So let me just tell you the offices that I work closely with. We have the Student Counseling Service, we have the Student Health Service, and then Rebecca's office, the Wellness Office. And those three offices actually will be working increasingly collaboratively as Miami reimagines the importance and the strategic significance of students taking ownership of their own health and well-being. So we have those three offices along with the Title IX Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, Becca Getson, and many of you also heard from her at orientation. Then we have the Student Disability Services Office, and Student Disability Services Office works closely with the Ranella Learning Center. And so actually 11% of Miami students are registered with the Student Disability Services Office and would be eligible for accommodation, and most of the accommodation at Miami deal with extended time on exams, for example, and things like that. They work closely with the Ranella Learning Center, which provides tutoring services, academic coaching, and they're also the ones that host the testing center, where the students that have accommodation and others go for their testing. And then the Dean of Students Office is also the Center of Emergency Response. And so there's an Emergency Response Manager that I work with very closely. There's the Office of Ethics and Student Conflict Resolution. That's the office that you may hope that you don't hear about from your loved one, because that's the office that deals with students who may have violated the Student Code of Conduct. And actually, your student might deal with that office because they have a complaint against another student. And then there's the Associate Dean of Students that works very closely with me, and the Associate Dean of Students, Gwen Fears, also then works closely with our transition areas. That's orientation, second-year programs, the Office of Residence Life, which many of you parents have much interest in as your students have entered our residential community for 1 of 2 years under the 2-year required residency. And then the parent-family programs, which Mark is associated with it. So there's a lot of offices on the Dean of Students side and a lot of resources that you'll want to know about that can be helpful to your students in the first 6 weeks and beyond. So we're going to take a couple of minutes now and review for you what's been going on at Miami since that possibly tearful time that you dropped them off. And you may have noticed that we were distributing Kleenexes that may have helped in the relieve some of the departure tears that you might have had. And I'm telling you, as I walked around on Thursday and saw many instances of parents hugging their kids, and me remembering back on the experience myself, there were a couple of times for myself that day that I was tearing up a little bit. But I want you to know that we're here to help your students take care of themselves, and they're going to be okay, right? They have all the resources they need to be successful, and importantly, you as parents are a significant resource for them. So we hope that you develop that communication plan with them that we encourage you to do at orientation. And if you didn't, make sure that you do. That's a communication plan where you just set kind of a standard time that you communicate with them if you're not doing it daily, which I know in some cases you are through text messages, etc. But when I got dropped off at school, it was a slightly different world, and our communication plan was that I would call them collect on Sunday after the Bear game, right? That was the first. So they knew that I would call. It was a time that they knew, and they knew that I didn't have any money, so I got to call and collect. So now the texts make this a lot easier. So, well, look, since you dropped your student off, there's been a lot going on. So Thursday was the drop-off day for most of you. I was walking around most of the day. I tried to visit briefly every one of the first-year halls, in part because some of our halls that have been recently renovated, the new spaces are just unbelievable. And I know parents, you probably had the same feeling about, this is a residence hall room now? It's a lot different from the residence hall room I lived in many years ago. But the halls are great. I got to meet the students, a lot of parents. And then Thursday night, and you might want to take some notes. Here's some things that you can ask your student about if you're interested. But Thursday night was some great activities that started at, and this is an incomplete list, by the way, and Rebecca in a minute is going to tell you a little bit more about how to learn more about these things that have occurred and are going on, and then spend some time talking about a few of them. But there was an event where it was standing room only at the Goggin Ice Rink. And Goggin is where we've got a couple of rinks there, and one of them is the hockey rink. That's the home ice for our excellent hockey team that many of you know about, and also the women's club hockey team that's been national champions. And so it's a fantastic program, but it was standing room only. So most of the 3,900 first-year students were actually here for that event at Goggin. It was incredible. It was impressive. It was about a 20-minute overview to things like broom ball that your student will likely play at the Goggin Ice Rink, to our synchronized skaters that have also won national champions, fantastic group of skaters, and the men's hockey team and the women's club team came out, and Swope, who's the Miami mascot, was there. Our men's hockey coach was there incognito, actually, but he was there checking out and rooting on his team that was there. And then after that 8 o'clock event at the ice rink, then there's a nice quad area between the ice rink and our rec center, and the students then congregated there for a very long evening of fun, where they could go to the rec center and work out, they could skate at Goggin, they could participate in cornhole tournament that was going on there. There was also some blow-up type play things that students could play in. There was a miniature golf. There were some frisbee type things they could play with. They could get pizza to eat, and Insomnia Cookies was there. It was just a great event. So that was Thursday night. That went on until late. And then Friday, there was all kinds of stuff going on, starting with Convocation. Convocation is the academic welcome for students. And Convocation was fantastic this year. Typically, it's a great event, but it was out on the academic quad, which is where the hub is, and the Miami seal that you're not supposed to step on. And it was just the most beautiful and glorious morning you could imagine. And the president spoke very eloquently about our code of love and honor and the importance for our students to take care of each other and to live by the values of the institution. And as we mentioned at orientation, our values, our institutional values, are much like the values that you had in your house. And so what we're trying to impress upon students is the importance of embracing the values that they learn growing up and maintaining them, not just maintaining them, but strengthening them when they move into our community. And so we do that by this reference to the Code of Love and Honor. And all the students received a card that looked like this, that then had the Code of Love and Honor on it. And it was a very emotional moment, actually, where the president of the Associated Student Government, Maggie Callahan, had the entire first-year class stand up and read the Code of Love and Honor. I am Miami. I believe that a liberal education is grounded in qualities of character and intellect, and then there's much more. But review that with your students sometime, because it's a very powerful and moving demonstration of very important principles that will be significant to them as they take care of themselves and each other in the 4 years here. And also during Convocation, the mayor of Huntington, West Virginia, I believe it's Steve Williams, was here as a speaker, and he spoke, again, very much in terms of turning his town around. Huntington, West Virginia, a few years ago, was kind of ridiculed as one of the least healthy towns in America, and they've turned that around, and it's a town with great pride now because they had vision and they expressed it to members of the community, and the community bought into the vision, much like we have a vision for Miami to embrace a healthy community that lives by our values. And he spoke, I was very inspired by his speech about the importance of community, just the same way we're talking about community here, not just at Miami, but with our partners in Oxford, Ohio. And when your student in 2 years moves off campus, they will have heard a lot about the importance of them learning how to enter a community and to act responsibly and to understand that they're a small piece of a larger community, and that when they move to a bigger community that they will be representing not just themselves but Miami University. So that was how Friday started. And by the way, the discussion group then, they went after convocation to talk about the book that the entire first-year class read. You've heard about it, I suspect. It's a very popular book, Hillbilly Elegy, by J.D. Vance, who's actually an Ohio State University graduate and then went on to go to Yale Law School. But he's from Middletown, Ohio, and he refers to himself as a hillbilly. And he talks about that experience of growing up and growing up in a different culture and a different environment that many of the other students that he went to Ohio State with. But others shared that same background with him. But it's an interesting book. If you haven't read it, it would give you something to talk with your student about. And it would be a book that I would recommend, and I suspect that you've heard of J.D. Vance anyway and have seen him on television. He seems to be omnipresent these days. And then there were many activities, academic activities for students on Friday night. But toward the end of the day, it may have been my favorite, the Love and Honor celebration, which occurs at Yager Stadium, where the football games and other events will be. And at Yager Stadium, at the Love and Honor event, they learned about the Miami Fight Song and several other things, the school cheer related to, they have that kind of school spirit in high school. Why can't they have that school spirit in college is the idea. And many schools have this, Notre Dame being an example, and that's where our president came from. And so we're really trying to instill that kind of celebration of the student athlete back at Miami again. And we've got a football team that made history last year. They started 0-6, and then they won 6 in a row, which was a new record that then allowed them to be invited to a bowl game. So there's much to be proud of. And then one of the really cool things was at the end of the Code of Love and Honor celebration, and I'm going to show you this, the students all marched out onto the football field because each year the school class they go out and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, I hope you will. They go out on the field, and as I tweeted about this on Friday, from many eyes, the students made a single M, the beveled M that's Miami's signal, and it's actually, talk about awe-inspiring and bringing a tear to your eye. The students built a community which we hope that they will continue to embrace for the next 4 years. When they went out and made that M, it was awesome. And then we all went over to the women's volleyball game after that for the women's volleyball team, by the way, last year went to the NCAA tournament. And that's action-packed, let me tell you, women's volleyball. It was a great crowd. And then after that, there was just a huge amount of events going on. The students could pick up what they call the passport. They could then get stamped at all these events. So I'm just going to tell you a few of them that I was at. I got tired. I was tired, I'm telling you. There was yoga on the Central Quad under the stars, which was great. There was a tournament on Cook Field, a dodgeball tournament where there was multiple games going on. There was a succulent planting event at Armstrong Student Center. There was a make-your-own license plate thing going on at the Armstrong Student Center. There was a movie at the president's actual house that the students could go to and attend. This is an incomplete list. I went to as many of those things as I could. It was actually so big I couldn't make it to all of them. I bet your student couldn't have, even if they tried also. And then it all culminated in a fireworks event, I think that started at 10:45 or something ridiculous. I got to tell you that I was in bed by that time, so I'm just sorry. But they didn't need to have me there. Many other staff members were there, and it was a great fireworks display that I heard. And then the next day, Saturday, it was Miami students take over Oxford. And there was a scavenger hunt that they could win big prizes, and then there was a farmer's market in Oxford that was just fantastic. And then that night was the Armstrong Palooza, which is getting them used to every Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Rebecca will tell you about. There's programming at the Armstrong Student Center. I was there. There was just a huge amount of stuff going on at the Armstrong Palooza that night. It was a huge amount of fun. And then on Sunday, your students were so tired that we had to let them sleep in, I'm just telling you. But in the middle of the day, there was an excellent event over at Millett, which is where the women play volleyball and the men and women play basketball. And so we wanted the students to know about that venue. And it was an event I'm going to let Rebecca tell you about, calling It Is My Place.
Thanks, Mike. So It Is My Place is a theater troupe that we bring in for this Welcome Weekend event, and it demonstrates to students different skills on how to intervene when they are in situations that could be uncomfortable, unsafe, or dangerous. And so we want them to be able to not only know that it is our expectation that we look out for each other and that we care about each other, but that we also want to give them the types of skills that they need so that they can intervene effectively and safely. And so the types of scenarios that this theater troupe puts on for our students talks a lot about real-life situations at parties or in residence halls, and they concentrate on topics that are related to sexual assault, sexual harassment, alcohol use and drug use, alcohol poisoning and intoxication when medical intervention could be necessary, as well as prescription drugs. And then we talk about healthy relationships, communication, and just how to be a good student and classmate with their peers. And so as they demonstrate these different skills, it's very interactive. Our students have an opportunity to text message in their responses to a situation before the entire scenario unfolds. So it really gives them an opportunity to see a multitude of ways to intervene and respond to these types of situations. We also hope that it prepares them that as they enter into a college environment where alcohol use can look different than it did in high school, that they're a little bit more knowledgeable and a little bit more aware of what these situations look like. Now, this isn't the only time that they'll get the information. Many of your students will also be in a class called UMB 101. It's a freshman seminar class or first-year seminar class. They will again get this information through a program called Step Up. Step Up is a program that is peer-led, which means our Hawks, the ones I mentioned earlier, will talk with their classmates and then be able to practice these skills in some role modeling and some scenario-based learning where they can practice the skills of how to intervene safely and effectively. Ultimately, the message that we're giving our students is that we need to look out for each other and that we care about each other. And so we hope to cultivate this culture where our students feel comfortable and confident about intervening and looking out for each other. So I mentioned the UMB 101 class, which kind of launches us into a topic that we need to discuss about classes in general, because they all started today. So I'll let our Dean of Students talk a little bit about syllabi, and what to expect this week.
Indeed. And let me just add, Rebecca, to the great work that you did getting It Is My Place here for us the last 2 years. This is a program that was about 2 hours that your students spent last night, and we had almost all of our first-year students there. The turnout was impressive, and you may have had a call afterwards because the actors, they don't hold back on the language, they don't hold back on the nature of the scenarios. This is pretty raw, and it has to be raw. It gets their attention, and at the same time, while it recognizes the type of things and the situations that your students might be encountering while they're here, it also, at the same time, tries to recognize and celebrate the students that are making excellent choices. That's ultimately what it's all about. Those that are not drinking until they're 21, those who are abstaining with respect to their romantic relations, those are things that we want to reinforce, at the same time understanding that for students who choose to behave in other ways, we need to give them the tools that they need to be successful. So as Rebecca pointed out, this is day one of class. Sometimes the students refer to this as syllabus week, but we would like to think that there's actually stuff going on in class this week. So they have to be going to class now, and I'm sure they are, of course, especially the first week. But this is a great opportunity to check with them. How was class today? Tell me about, most of the classes are on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule or a Tuesday, Thursday. So if you talk to them at the end of today about how their classes were, it would probably be all their Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes that you'll be hearing about. And then tomorrow you could talk to them about how they were their Tuesday, Thursday classes. But they will get a syllabus in class. I used to like to send out my syllabus even beforehand, before the first day of class, and then give the students a little quiz on the syllabus. Spend a little bit of time on it. No, it's not worth any points. It's just to make sure, because the syllabus, as you will remember if you went to college, the syllabus is sort of like the contract between the student and the professor. Here's what to expect. Here's how you're going to be evaluated in class. Here are my expectations. Here are my policies. And your student really is at a disadvantage if they don't understand what's on a faculty member's syllabus. So please encourage your student to scrutinize that syllabus carefully, because there's a lot of information in there that's going to be helpful for them throughout the semester. And also, although they get the syllabus this week, typically they're going to get the syllabus and then they're going to go on and start talking about the topics that are in the classes. So that's going on this week. It may be that your student may be tinkering with their schedule still, although that would be uncommon at this point. But we know that there's a little bit of tinkering that goes on, but you should be aware that the last day to do anything in terms of changing classes is Wednesday. That's 2 days from now at midnight. So make sure that your student knows that they're going to be locked in on Wednesday night. No more changes are going to be possible. So everybody will go through a nice week of class. They'll be exhausted at the end of the week. So, of course, we give them Memorial Day weekend so they can have Monday off. And I'm sorry, yeah, Labor Day. Sorry, Mike, the beginning of the summer is not this week. It's the end of the summer, and that's Labor Day weekend, right? So I'm still coming to grips with the reality of it myself, to be honest with you. So Labor Day weekend, they get Monday off. And then we have an important event Wednesday that Rebecca will tell you a little bit more about in our central quad.
Yes, because we know that college is more than just inside the classroom. And so their outside the classroom experiences are also important. And on Wednesday, we have what we call Mega Fair. Mega Fair is where several hundred student organizations come out to display 500. We have up to 500 student organizations that come out and they are able to showcase what their student organization is about. And students are invited to attend and kind of shop around to see what their interests are, what kinds of things they would like to learn more about, and sign up and join a student organization. At that time, the students are able to ask some questions. Some of them have booths that are set up so that they can try out the art or try out the activity that they do and learn more about how they would like to spend some of their out-of-classroom time. We encourage our students to go and check this out. There will also be mini mega fairs that will showcase topic-specific student orgs throughout the next couple weeks. So that we want our students to make sure that if they see something that piques their interest on Wednesday, there is an opportunity to learn more in the future. So we want to let you know that there are multiple ways your students can be engaged and involved, and student organizations are a great way for them to do that.
In fact, just to follow up on Rebecca's point, this is a great opportunity for them, as she said, to get connected with other students who share their passion as they find these student organizations. And the research has shown that when students get connected to each other socially or through organizations, in terms of that element of their transition, that actually also benefits their academic transition to school. So they have had intentionally a lot of opportunity to connect with other students in their residence hall and outside their residence hall these last few days since move-in. So I think it would be a good idea for you to be talking with your students about, tell me some of the things. Have you been meeting people in your halls? Are there opportunities to build communities there? And you know what? Don't worry if you hear, you know, yeah, I've seen a few people, but I'm still not really feeling like I'm getting connected because it's early. There's going to be lots of opportunities, and that's where if they haven't felt like, and many will felt like they've already made some connections, this mega fair can be really important. But there's way more opportunities than this mega fair, and Rebecca will just tell you a little bit about this whole concept of it's not just welcome weekend anymore, it's the first 50 days. And that's, again, really thematic to what we're talking about here.
Yes, so our first 50 days program is a multitude of activities that are going to be occurring every night. So we talk a little bit about Late Night Miami, and your student may hear about that. And Late Night Miami traditionally is on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturday nights, every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. But during the first 50 days, we really understand the importance of students getting connected and having opportunities to do things on campus. And so that first 50 nights, they can go and download an app, and we encourage you to check it out as well. If you go to the miamioh.edu to search Welcome Week, that's what I'm being told is the best way to get there. Search Welcome Week. When you do that, you'll be connected to the web page where you can see the opportunity to look at the calendar of all of the events. We have a wide range of events scheduled for our students, from live music to pottery to all types of events and opportunities. Here we go, we got it up so that you can see and you can download the app. And we encourage you to check in with your student and ask them what kinds of events that they've been involved in. What we really want to illustrate is between the opportunities to get involved in student organizations, opportunities to be involved in our first 50 days events, and some exciting new opportunities to be involved off campus and in the city of Oxford. There really is a lot of opportunity for your student to do other things besides maybe behaviors that we hope that they won't engage in. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. Did you want to talk a little bit more about the community picnic and things that are happening off campus?
Yeah, speaking of the community, the relationship between Miami and Oxford, Ohio is so fantastic. They're great and gracious hosts of the university, and our relationship has really strengthened over the last several years. Our police forces work closely together, the city government and the university administration works closely together. But importantly, what we want is we want to connect the students to the permanent residents. This is their home away from home. We want them to feel like this is their home. Oxford wants them to feel like Oxford, Ohio is their home. And I'll tell you, Miami students are great. That's why I came here 29 years ago. They're awesome. The community people want to meet Miami students, and the more that they can interact with them, the more that they will share our love for Miami students as well. And so one easy thing they can do is Thursday night, there's a community picnic that is affectionately also known as a pig roast, because historically we would roast a pig, and I think there's actually going to be a pig that was roasted this year as well that will then be turned into pulled pork for the event. There'll be music up there. There will be all kinds of tables with information about how to get involved. They'll meet other people. They'll meet community members. And interestingly, so this used to be, over the summer in Oxford, there was a Thursday night concert series where most of the participants there were permanent residents, because Oxford does have summer school, but it's not as highly populated as the regular fall and spring semester. And in an effort to bring the students in greater contact with the community, we've done something interesting this year. We've extended that Thursday night concert series thanks to Jenny Levering and her Office of Student Activities, and to Enjoy Oxford, which is an Oxford organization that promotes the town. They've gotten together to extend the concert series so that it's going to go all September. So we really hope that the community members and the students will mingle at these Thursday night concerts. So tell your student about that. They can go uptown and hear a concert on Thursday night. It's a great way to bring everyone together. And by the way, for any of you who are from Ohio, you know that September's in Ohio some of the best weather that we have. So chances are that most of those evenings will be just glorious. So before we leave this part of the program, I just want to make one more pitch. Parents, I think you know, but if you don't know, every year your student will be automatically enrolled in Miami's default student insurance. We require every student to carry health insurance at Miami because health is the most important thing for them. So if they have an incident, we have to make sure that they have the coverage that they need. Most of the students we know are covered on family health plans. But students have to actively make a choice to enroll or waive, and that deadline is August 31st. So if you haven't made a decision as to whether your student needs to be enrolled or waived, please make sure and talk with your student. It's easy to waive. You just have to show that you have comparable coverage. And particularly if you're from out of state, the way the insurance market is these days, the student health insurance plan is actually pretty cheap. It's if you looked at the prices on the exchange in particular, it's about $1,550, a little bit less than that. And if you're from out of state, you may be out of network. It might actually be worth your while to enroll your student in this plan. You might want to do a little due diligence on it. So please take a look, and then remember you're going to have to do that every year for the next 4 years to make a decision of enroll or waive. So thank you for taking care of that. So as Rebecca pointed out, we do now want to talk a little bit more about the first 50 days in terms of other things that are going to be going on besides the things that the university and the community offer, because really they're making their connections with other students. And other students are going to be trying to find ways to socialize that maybe aren't sponsored by the university. And inevitably, there's going to be the issue of whether they choose to break the law if they're not 21 to consume alcohol. And if they do break the law and consume alcohol when they're not 21, we hope that they exercise the kind of smart choices that you've, I'm sure, instilled with them in the 18 years that you've had them. Things like always make your own drink, be smart, never let your drink out of your sight. Ideally, have a container that you open. And I'm going to turn this over to let Rebecca share some thoughts with you in a minute, but one of the things that keeps me up at night, and really honestly not much does, that I want to remind you of, parents, are the off-campus house parties. And off-campus house parties may represent the most danger for your students for a lot of reasons. If your students were going to be breaking the law and consuming alcohol when they're not 21, and I hope that they don't do that, but they might still want to be smart, and they might decide, I'm only going to have 2 drinks because I have a little anxiety about socializing, so maybe I'll just have 2 drinks and I'll be safe and smart, which is what we encourage all of our students to do if they choose to drink, is to be safe and smart. But the house parties make it hard for them. The house parties are unsupervised. Unlike the bars, where there's actually some supervision and some oversight, our permit holders are trying to provide for those students who are 21 a safe environment, but outside of the bars, there's very little oversight, and sometimes it's underage students supervising underage student, and sometimes it's 21-year-old students breaking Ohio social hosting laws, hosting parties where they allow 18, 19, and 20-year-olds they don't know to enter the party. And this is dangerous, not just for the alcohol that your son or daughter might consume there, but because there's an overlap between alcohol and sexual and interpersonal violence. And most of the instances of sexual and interpersonal violence at Miami involve alcohol, largely because most of the perpetrators of sexual and interpersonal violence have used alcohol, and most of the perpetrators of sexual and interpersonal violence are using alcohol as a weapon. And we know from our own surveys at Miami University that in 80% of the cases, sexual and interpersonal violence occurs between 2 people who know each other, romantic partners, former romantic partners, friends, or acquaintances. And many times these incidents originate in places where alcohol is present, even if it hasn't been consumed by the people involved. And it happens in places where alcohol is present because usually that's a social space, and students feel safe. They've gone there with other people they know, and they have a network. Their friends are there, and oh yeah, their friends know them. they all let their guard down, and they can't let their guard down, and they have to look out for each other, and we have to take care of each other. And Rebecca is going to tell you a little bit more about these off-campus house parties and some other things to be concerned about.
So one of the things that you can help us with is to reiterate some of the messages that your students are getting about how to be safe and smart. And so some of the tips that we share with students is that if you do plan to go out, what we would appreciate for them to do is to have a plan, right? So talk to your friends, have them talk to their friends about what is the plan for the evening, where are they going to go. The next step is how are they getting home. And so one of the things that we encourage is that friends that go out together come home together. And so what we talk to them about is if you're going to a party, if you're going to the bars uptown, if you're going over to a different residence hall, that you have some kind of idea of what time you want to be back home, and if you're going with your group, that your group decides to come back together, that we don't leave them behind or we don't let one of our friends out of the group try to get home by themselves. We also ask them to eat before they go out. We know that eating before alcohol consumption is a protective factor, and it helps slow the absorption of alcohol into the bloodstream. So we encourage food before and during the party. And that's one of the things that we also talk to our off-campus students about, that if they want to host a party, there are some measures that they can take to make sure that they're hosting a safe party. And we encourage them to have water, non-alcoholic drinks, and snacks available to their guests to make sure that they are being responsible in how they approach alcohol. We also ask them to avoid what they call jungle juice, which is these open troughs of alcohol that many people will pour different types of alcohol into and people dip their glasses into. There's no way to know how much alcohol you're consuming or what is in that jungle juice. So we ask our students to avoid serving that and to avoid participating in drinking that jungle juice. It's a very dangerous way of consuming alcohol. We also talk about reducing the risk and stepping up when they see something that is dangerous or if somebody needs medical help. And we talk to our students, what were some of the barriers to intervening or to making sure that they felt comfortable in calling for help. And they told us they didn't want to get in trouble and they didn't want to get that person into trouble. And so several years ago, it was 2014, I believe, is when Miami University adopted the Good Samaritan policy. The Good Samaritan policy states that judicial action from the university will not occur if a student actively seeks help for themselves or for another student because of alcohol or drug use. And so we want to make sure that our students understand that policy. That policy can be found in our student handbook, and we encourage you and your student to talk about that policy and to, and read it and understand it so that they know and feel confident that when they're calling for help, even if they themselves have been drinking under the age of 21, or if drugs are in the environment, that they're not going to get in trouble from the university. Other consequences may occur, and education will still be required of those students because we want to make sure that this isn't repeated. However, the Good Samaritan policy is there as a safety net so that our students can feel more confident in calling for help. We also, to look at creating a safer environment for our off-campus parties, is the Good Neighbor policy. And Mike could probably talk to us a little bit more about that, but ultimately we're trying to create an opportunity for our students to have parties, but do so in a more safe environment.
The Good Neighbor policy, briefly, and we'll make a couple of other comments and try to get a few of your questions in, so thank you. The Good Neighbor policy really derives from the concern that we have that we help educate our students to be good citizens like they are before they entered Miami and how they will be after they exit Miami, but also from the concern that we have about these unsupervised house parties. So the Good Neighbor policy, police will intervene in parties that are highly visible, that seem like they have an open guest list, that seem like they have spirit, what they call handles of alcohol, large bottles, or jungle juice like Rebecca described. So dangerous parties like that. We're not against all house parties. That's part of college, but there's some that are very problematic of the type that we just described. And the tools that the local police have to intervene is almost all of these parties are creating litter and violating local noise ordinance. So they will cite them. from a civil or a criminal perspective, the Oxford Police, and then those reports are public. And so Miami gets those reports, and then we hold the renters of those houses responsible. If they have one violation, we send them a letter, encourage them to be good neighbors. That's what we want. If they have a second violation, the mayor and often I and other staff members meet with the residents of that house to talk about why are you doing this, what it means to be a good neighbor, and then if there's a third violation, the residents of that house will be held accountable in our judicial system because it's very important for them to be good neighbors. So our Good Sam policies, and you can find these online on Miami's website, and the Good Neighbor policies are two very important tools for us in terms of trying to build a caring community where we're giving students the tools and the resources they need to make smart choices as they relate to alcohol. And one last point, and then I think we can get to questions, although I'll give Rebecca a chance to make her last point as well. Another thing that you can just help us with, you have the largest amount of influence on your student. You have more influence than we do. I suppose the influence that you have is more equivalent to the influence that their peers have. And what we're trying to figure out here is this generation has an embrace of the abuse of spirits, particularly in doing shots and large amounts of alcohol, not beer and wine, but hard alcohol that raises their blood alcohol quickly, which seems to be leading to a phenomenon of more and more intensive blackouts, which is where the real danger zone is for students. So if you could talk with your students and in fact help us understand this and maybe encourage your students, if they're going to violate the law and they're going to drink, that maybe to do so and avoid the shots at least, and as Rebecca said, the jungle juice, and maybe they could nurse a beer for a long period of time if they're just trying to fit in. I don't advocate that for somebody 21 that's not 21, but if they're going to feel the pressure to drink and they're going to do it, it might be a better option.
Thanks, Mike. And I would just reiterate the fact that if your student feels that maybe they need some help with these issues, either they need help understanding the culture in which this alcohol use is occurring or drug use is occurring, or they feel that a friend may benefit from the services from our student counseling center or from the Office of Student Wellness, that they seek out that help. We have several resources on campus, and we want to make sure that our students feel comfortable and safe on our campus. So please talk to your student, encourage them to utilize these resources either for themselves or to intervene and help a friend.
Okay. So at this point, we certainly have more that we can talk about. We would invite you to submit questions at this point if you have any. If you don't have any, we'll talk about a couple things. That's perfectly fine. We'll talk about another kind of recent phenomenon that we've observed that would be relevant actually to many of you. We're fortunate that over the years that the stigma associated with mental health issues has declined. And that's a fantastic thing because what it's done is it's allowed people to, more people to receive treatment, and therefore more people receiving treatment at earlier ages. It's really opened the door to college campuses for some students in ways that might not have been accessible many years ago. And so what we find is we've done pre-tests on students before they enter Miami or early in their Miami careers. And we find that historically, interestingly, the biggest mental health concern that students had coming in typically was depression. And about 20% of students coming onto campus would have pre-screened for potential depression. And so, by the way, I want you to know we have an excellent, reasonably well-staffed student counseling service where we have a psychiatrist and counselors available. We very gratefully have just received the okay to go ahead and hire 2 new full-time counselors there. So make sure that your students know about this resource. But what we've observed, interestingly, 10 years ago, 10% of students pre-screened for anxiety. And in the last 10 years, that number has now grown to 20. And in fact, anxiety is now overtaking depression as the #1 mental health concern for our students. And so between depression and anxiety and then learning disabilities, which a large proportion of the students in the Student Disability Service are dealing with learning disabilities, many of these issues are being treated by medication appropriately. But there's very often a significant danger associated with mixing alcohol and these prescription drugs. And not only is there a danger to the person for whom the medication is prescribed, but even in high schools, I suspect that you've all dealt with situations of drug sharing from students who've prescribed medication and sharing it with other students that are not prescribed, and then mixing it with alcohol. And this is a very, very dangerous combination that can really enhance the effect of the alcohol and contribute to make it much more likely to black out and to have other negative consequences. And Rebecca's office, the wellness office, is very much trying to get ahead of this. I mean, probably the worst thing for this would be to be mixing it with prescription pain medication, the opioids. That's a real recipe, a real dangerous recipe. And Rebecca's wellness office is trying to do prevention and education on this, which is much better than trying to deal with it after the fact. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Rebecca.
Other than the programs will be available to students, and they can always ask their RA about when the programs will be occurring, because that's the venue and the resource that we use and partner with most closely is our residence hall staff. And so they will have the information that they need about what types of programming is available when it comes to prescription drugs, alcohol, and even the combination of those substances. We do have a question, and it's in regards to MegaFair. And I talked about all the student organizations that are available to students, and the question is, how do they find which ones? Is there a map or some kind of guide? And the answer to that is that MegaFair is grouped by topics. So all of the health and wellness and fitness type organizations are going to be huddled together. All of the academic student organizations are huddled together. All the performing arts student organizations are huddled together so that they will be able to find that. Now, when they get there, those things will be marked. But part of the fun is kind of just tooling around and looking and discovering that. And we really encourage them to go as groups. Many of the residence halls are already planning that the RAs will kind of assemble groups and walk together so that students don't have to feel alone or that they have to navigate this all by themselves. So reaching out to residence hall staff, going as a group is a good way to do it, and then enjoying the fun of navigating through all of those student orgs and seeing what's available. But like I said, they will be huddled together by topics. So if they have a particular interest like performing arts, they can go in one direction and find all the student orgs related to that.
And if they are overwhelmed by MegaFair, which is possible, as Rebecca pointed out, in the following weeks, all of those categories of student organizations that she described, like the service organizations or the arts organizations, they're effectively going to have their own smaller MegaFairs as well, where your student can attend and learn more. And they can also get on what's known as the Hub. If you talk with them about the Hub, they can just type into their Miami OH search engine, SCANU, of course, the Hub, and that has a listing of all the student organizations. And what's great, Rebecca had pointed out the UNV 101 class that about 75% of the first-year students will be taking. Ask your student if they have a transition course. Not all of them are called UNV 101, but they're all effectively the same or a similar curriculum. All of those students, not only will they be, I suppose, encouraged, you can never make anybody go, I suppose, but encouraged to go to MegaFair, they will have an assignment where they will reflect on MegaFair and to describe one of the organizations that they talked with and how it might fit into their plans. And what we do in the UNV 101 class is it's not just about finding these student organizations, it's about the connection between the student organization and what they're studying. Because in almost every case, even minimally, if it was just through developing their leadership experience, there's going to be a connection between what the students are doing in their classes and in these co-curricular experiences they have, which is one of the profoundly significant things about a residential campus like Miami. And one of the great things about the residential experience is this overlap between their co-curricular lives and their academic lives.
We have another question, and I'm hoping maybe Mike has more insight to this. But during the first 50 days, do students meet with their advisors to talk about their spring schedules?
Most definitely. And in fact, interestingly, if they're in the UNV 101 class, so this would be, for those students who are not in the UNV 101 class, parents, you can really help them out here because that is built into the UNV 101 class, where before they meet with their academic advisor, and they will all have a meeting set up with their academic advisor that will occur, if not within the first 6 weeks, right around the first 6 weeks, because then I think the registration for spring occurs somewhere around the 9th week or something like that. I'm making that up a little bit, but it's roughly correct. And so they will, in their UNV class, sort of plot out a test schedule that they can then bring into the advisor. The advisor will be impressed that they went in with a plan. They'll know their advisor's name. They will have been proactive if they had the UNV class when reaching out and making their appointment even before the advisor reaches out to them. So excellent question, really important question, because scheduling and advising is so important. You want your student to move through the curriculum and really get the most out of the Miami plan, because the Miami plan is such a great thing to expose them to all this excellence in our university and from all of our divisions. But you also want them to get out expeditiously and make good choices with the classes they take.
I think we have some questions coming in, so we want to make sure that we get to some of those. What do we have?
So on the same issue, and by the way, this is about the 3-minute warning too for everyone. Will advisors talk with them about winter term? Yes, I believe they will, and I think it would be good for you to encourage your student to talk to advisor about winter term as well. It's a good opportunity to take a class. I would say that it's a 3-week term, so they shouldn't take more than 3 credit hours. 15-week term, roughly 15 credit hours, 3 credit hour winter term, 3-week winter term, 3 credit hour class. How do they find their advisor contact information? They go to their My Miami, and on My Miami under their student tab, it's very easy. They just go to their own student tab, and the name and contact information for their academic advisor will be there. Ask them, seriously, just ask your student, who's your academic advisor? Just tell me who they are. Did you find them? Did you go to My Miami? Did you go to your tab? Did you find them? Excellent thing to do, because they have to know this person. It's so critical to them.
Okay, so we know that was a lot of information that we shared with you today, and this will not be the last time that you'll have to view this. We invite you to come back, because Mark is going to post this webinar onto the parents' website, and so it can be accessed at any time. Additionally, if you know of any other parents that maybe could not join us here today, please let them know that it's available and that they can access it online. We appreciate your time today, and from the Office of Student Wellness, I want to thank you for this opportunity to share this information with you.
And Rebecca, thanks so much. Mark, I'm just going to say one last thing. When your student moved in, we have these 4 beautiful posters that together they actually create a bigger poster if you connect them together. And your student received one of these 4 when they moved into the hall. And if they didn't, they should look for them, because they're still around. And then there's actually a note on the back signed by President Crawford, which talks about the fact that these 4 posters represent individuals moving into a community and the importance of community. And the posters themselves split up the content of the Code of Love and Honor. So please talk with your student about the things that you value. Please talk with your students about Miami values. And thank you for being such an important part of your student experience and for being partners in this with us. We'll talk with you soon.